We're live. I wanted to welcome all of you here today in Liz Wicks's studio. My name is Linda Falcone, and on behalf of Advancing Women Artists and the Florentine, we're so happy to have you here today to celebrate the second edition of Restoration Conversations, Art Rescue in Progress. Elisabeth Wicks, art restorer, we're here in your studio. So if you want to welcome our guests.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited about this. This is the first time we've ever done a live YouTube event from the studio, and I thank Advancing Women Artists and the Florentine for putting this together for us. And my studio is small. I share it with my two colleagues, Marina Vincenti, who I'm working on this project that we'll be talking about with, and Nicoletta Fontani. And we've never had more than about 15 people in an actual studio visit. So this is thrilling to welcome so many of you from near and far, and some of you from very far. So welcome.
I saw that there are guests from Poland and Australia, from California, from London.
Fantastic.
So we are
Hawaii.
Worldwide. Exactly.
Yes. Seattle.
Elisabeth has worked in the conservation field for over 30 years, and she has restored a whole variety of works, from the murals of Radio City Music Hall to the sculptures of Michelangelo. And she has worked with several pieces of art by women, including contemporary women artists, but also Angelica Kaufman, Violante Cerotti, and obviously Violante Ferroni, who we are going to be talking about today. So we can get to it, right? Here we have two works by this Florentine 18th century artist. And this is where it all happens. We know that they're devotional pieces depicting the episodes of the life of San Giovanni di Dio, or Saint John of God. But first and foremost, where do they come from? Where are they going? And how did they get here?
Thanks, Linda. Okay. Well, these paintings, these large canvas paintings by Violante Ferroni, are both from the former hospital of Saint John of God, San Giovanni di Dio, in Florence. And we were working for the health organization, the USLA, the National Health Organization of Tuscany, and came upon these two paintings and realized that they were by a woman artist. And so that's how our project started. We got in touch with the Advancing Women Artists Foundation, and who is graciously sponsoring the work. But the works come from the former hospital, which is a beautiful structure. And if I can have the first slide, mettete la prima diapositiva. Grazie. Okay, here you see the monumental atrium where the paintings are located, and this is where they're going back once they've been restored. So you see, it's not your typical hospital entryway. It's a very, very large Baroque structure. It almost looks like the nave of a church. It has a gorgeous spiral, half spiral double staircase. And the paintings are located on the left and the right on the upper portion of the staircase, and there's a frescoed ceiling, and there are Baroque sculptures. So it's all a really beautiful decorative ensemble, and it's also very important iconographically, because this was where the patients came in and there was triage done before they entered the wards of the hospital. So these were the first pieces of art that patients would see coming into the hospital, and I think that makes them very significant.
And it will be today also for modern day visitors.
That's right. That's right. These will be the first things that people will see going into this structure, which now has a museum function. It still belongs to the National Health Organization of Tuscany, the USLA, and there are administrative offices, and there are still some health clinics. So it has both a hospital and a museum function, and it's open to the public, which is, of course, a very important factor for the restoration sponsored by Advancing Women Artists.
Liz, I wanted to ask you, because I know for a lot of our guests today, Violante Ferroni is not a known name. So I thought we could start. I mean, if we place her on a timeline, she's about 100 years after Artemisia Gentileschi. Could you tell us a little bit more about her as an artist?
Yeah, I can tell you what we know, because right now we're in the process of fleshing out her story and putting a face to the name of Violante Ferroni, who, having received this public commission in the mid-1700s, was obviously a very important artist in her day. She had a solid reputation, but really we know very little about her. Very little has been written about her. So we're in the process of doing documentary research and finding out more about her story. What we do know is that she was born in 1720 in Florence to Cosimo Ferroni, who was probably associated with the Medici court and possibly an ambassador. He had an ambassadorial function with the embassies of Austria and Innsbruck and also in Brussels. And his wife, Violante's mother, was she converted from Judaism. She was born Jewish, and her name was Rosa de Lichtenberg. So I think that's a really interesting aspect, actually, of Violante's history. But she was baptized a Christian in the Duomo of Florence, and we have her baptism records. And we know that she was named Violante after the Medici princess, Violante Beatrice. And so she was obviously associated with the court of the Medici, because that Violante, the Medici princess, was her godmother. So she was not necessarily born with a silver spoon in her mouth, but she was in a family that was associated with the court of the Medici. And she showed evidently prowess at a very early age, because by the time she was 16, she was admitted into the very prestigious Academy of Arts and Drawing, the Accademia dell'Arte del Disegno in Florence. And you may remember, you may not know this, that Artemisia Gentileschi was the first woman admitted to that academy about a century earlier. So there were very few women admitted. They were not able to copy works at the Uffizi until 1770. So they were admitted and they had certain privileges, but they didn't have all the privileges that the male artist did. But for her to be admitted in 1736 at 16, that was evidently a sign that she was really talented at an early age. And it's also possible that she was admitted so that she could exhibit in a show, which she did in 1737, which was the exhibit at the Accademia di San Luca, which was the exhibit for the Art Academy that was patronized by the Medici. And Violante, we know, made 2 paintings for that exhibit. They were copies of all artists in this period learned by copying works of others. So this was normal, and certainly for a 16-year-old, quite normal. She copied a work by Luca Giordano and a work by Guido Reni, and both of those works have been lost. So we don't know about those, but we do know of other works of hers that maybe we'll talk about a little bit later on. But certainly this was her most prestigious commission.
Because it was a public commission, no?
Exactly.
For a woman so young,
right?
A female artist to receive a public commission of this kind.
Mm-hmm.
Was it because she had connections?
Well, at the time that she received the commission, she wasn't quite so young, but she was still in her late 20s. And yes, her career started presumably with lessons that she took from another woman painter who has also been patronized by advancing women artists. And
she's also been here.
She's also been here in this studio.
Yes.
Another Violante Sirius Cerotti, who was just 10 years older than Violante Ferroni, and was her painting teacher. So she may have been her first teacher. Mm-hmm. And that's very important because Violante Sirius also was in a tradition of women artists who were also teachers and passed down their knowledge. There was a whole circle of women painters in mid-18th century Florence. and Violante was evidently a part of that circle. She then became she entered the studio of Gian Domenico Ferretti, who was one, along with Vincenzo Meucci, who was the artist who painted actually a fresco on the ceiling of the monumental atrium of the hospital, along with Giovanni Botti. She entered into his studio and she worked with him for a number of years. And he was one of the top artists of the 18th century in Florence. So she definitely got a lot of experience, possibly even in fresco, because he was a fresco artist as well as a painter. But large religious and historical compositions, portraits, and then Ferretti had great expertise in doing these small caricature paintings, the carnival paintings, the harlequins, and she may have helped out with those. We don't know. We're in the process of doing documentary research to find out more about her.
Yeah, there's so much that I want to react to in what you said, but I really want to discipline myself because we are in the studio,
right?
And I want to give as much attention as we can to the paintings themselves, to the restoration process, because these two paintings are actually in various phases of repair. So we have one who's farther along and finished or almost finished, and the other that is, you can tell us more about how you got here in the sense of your restoration work.
Sure. So we started this project we actually started it earlier, but we got the first painting from the hospital. And at the time, I want to say that we got that painting, the frescoes were under restoration. So the whole atrium was covered in scaffolding. So even getting the painting off the wall was a challenge. We had to sort of ease it out. We had to build our own scaffold on the stairs and ease it out from under the major scaffolding that was covering the whole atrium. But I also want to tell you that these projects as large as these public projects, are always a collaborative effort. We are a team. So I am working on this project with my colleague, Marina Vincenti. And really the first stage in any project of this sort is diagnostic techniques. We want to know what's wrong with the painting, and we want to know what the painting's technique is. And so we have a phase in which we are analyzing the paint and the canvas and the damage and the deterioration, and then we make a treatment plan. So we're helped in that process by various figures who are diagnostic technicians, photographers. We had a whole analytical campaign carried out by the National Research Center of Italy. And so there's a lot of science behind it, and there's a lot of help. And then, of course, we have the art historical help and overseeing from the Soprintendenza, which is the National Trust of Italy that oversees a project of this sort and has to approve of the treatment plan, and step by step comes in. So there are lots of studio visits and lots of discussions. And so getting on to what these paintings, what their state is now, the painting on my right was the first painting that we tackled, and this painting was entitled, when we got it, we're not quite sure what it's called right now, but when we got the painting, it was called Saint John of God Visits Victims of the Plague. And it was extremely dark because it was covered by centuries of discolored varnish and a dirt film and glues. And so one of the first steps was the cleaning process. So if I can have the next slide, I'll show you a slide of the painting. Okay, in this slide, you see how dark this painting was. And you see those brighter areas. Those are areas where we have cleaned. We started out with small cleaning tests, and then those are actually areas where we figured out the process that we're going to be using to remove step by step the dirt layers, the varnishes, the old repaints, because these paintings have undergone previous restorations, which have sometimes caused further damage. And so in that slide, you see the painting at the beginning of the cleaning process. And of course, most people focus, quite evidently, this is an image, so they focus on the image, but there's a lot that goes behind the painting. There's a lot of structural work that people don't really understand much about or even know that we do. So I wanted to focus a little bit about that. The paint is on a ground layer, and those layers are on a canvas, and the canvas is on a stretcher. And so all of that has to be conserved and restored. And in the case of this painting, there were several tears, and I'm going to show you the next slide. So you can see there was a large tear in the, over here, the behind Linda.
I'll move, sorry.
Beneath the arm of the figure in that has a white sleeve, under her arm, there was a very large tear, and it goes into part of her arm. And so that tear and all of the other tears were stabilized. The paint was stabilized from the front, and then the painting was placed face down, and we re-wove the tears from the back. And so I think you can see on the right a picture of that process about halfway through the process, where we've placed threads along the tear and we're doing a repair of that tear. And so there's a whole, I can't talk about the whole thing, but there's a lot of structural work that goes on. And so that has happened in the case of this painting. And it has been attached to a new stretcher, which was a custom built stretcher, because the old stretcher was too flimsy and too wormwood eaten to be used again. So we used strips of canvas, and we attached them to the border, to the edges of the canvas. And then we moved back onto the front. And in the next slide, you see the painting with the areas of missing paint. Hopefully you can see this, because maybe some of your screens are quite small. But all of those areas, like that tear and many other areas where there were paint losses, we fill in those areas. We don't go over the original paint, but we go up to the border of the original, and we fill them with filling material, which in that slide is a reddish brown, because we're recreating the color of the ground layer. And then we use our colors, which are varnish colors and watercolors, to fill in the areas of missing paint. So with this one, it's almost completed. We've varnished the painting. We haven't done the final varnish, but basically this one is almost good to go. And the painting on my left is in a much earlier phase, because we started working on this one of course, we did all this during COVID too. So you can imagine we had a bit of a slowdown, but we started working on this one in July. And I will go with the next slide. Here you can see, okay, that is during the cleaning process. And that is the figure that is now covered over with this white facing paper, we call it. It's mulberry paper or Japanese paper. And that is during the cleaning process. And you can see there, you can see the arm of the child. The upper arm has been cleaned and the lower arm is being cleaned. And you can see how very dark the face is compared with the arm. And that's because it's still dirty. And then the back of the figure right behind my glove there is half cleaned. And so you can see a really big difference. I remember you, Linda, saying that the difference was amazing during this cleaning process.
It's really exciting.
It really was.
It's the most
very
exciting part.
Yeah. And so that's the cleaning. So that happened. And then I think I have a couple of other slides showing some of the work that we do. Until yesterday, this painting was on the floor of my studio. People think that we just sit in our chairs and we go dinky, dinky, dinky with our little brushes, but actually it's much more, it's often more,
it's more physical.
It's more physical, yeah. It's mental, but it's also quite physical. So if I can have the next slide, I'll show you the painting Okay, this is that painting on a large roller that we custom made to be able to turn the paintings over, because they're too large to be turned over just by flipping them over. So they have to be rolled up or rolled over a roller. And my colleague and I are doing that with this painting, which is St. John Gives Bread to the Poor. And in the next slide, you see the painting on the floor on a special bed that we have prepared for it, because it's about to undergo a process called consolidation, which is done with the application of a synthetic resin that, I mean, there are many ways to do it, but in this case, that was what happened. And that is to reaffix the layers of flaking paint and ground to the canvas and stabilize all the layers. So that's what I'm doing in that picture. We're finishing rolling it out, and then we're going to put it under low pressure and controlled heat and do that whole process, which we did, and worked on the tears like I described with the other painting. And so now it's on its, I'm going to get up now and show you over here the canvas that it is now attached. These paintings were not on another canvas. They have their original canvas. They've never been lined. So in the interest of doing a minimal intervention, that's something very important. We want to preserve that. So we did what's called a strip lining, where we just attached a strip of canvas, of new canvas at the edges. But we also did we placed another canvas on the stretcher, which is not attached to the painting. And so it's got stability, but it doesn't have a very strong presence of a conservation intervention. So it's called minimal intervention. And so you can see that canvas, and then the original canvas is just on top of it here. Okay. And so now this painting is about to be have the cosmetic work done on it. So we'll finish the fills, and we'll do the in-painting, and we'll continue our process. But it hasn't been varnished, which is why you see it looks duller than the other painting. And if I saturate the colors, then the colors come out a great deal more. And so maybe I can do that for you.
Liz, I was thinking the cosmetic part we all understand, right? There's no problem in understanding the cosmetic part. But I was in here last week, and the painting was in fact on the floor, and the big question was, will it be on the wall? Will it be up and ready for our guests on Friday the 13th? And you got it yesterday. Got it up yesterday. I see you have your station, a mini station, and I'm hoping, and our guests are hoping, that you will be able to show us in real time. We'll do a restoration reality show. And if you could do something for us.
Okay, yeah, it's going to be like the first time Julia Child did her PBS shows back in the 60s. So we've never done this before, so bear with us. But I think first I might I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm going to wet an area of the canvas with mineral spirits, just so you can see the colors saturated. So you can see what I'm talking about when I was talking about the fact that this painting seems more opaque. I'm going to go over here and just wet. Okay, so this is mineral spirits, and it emulates a varnish layer, which Violante would have put on. Unfortunately, her original layer is not here anymore because it was cleaned off during prior restorations. There have been at least 2 restorations on this painting and possibly 3 on the other painting. So hopefully you can see that, and it's not reflecting too much. And you can also see this very mysterious figure that's the only figure that's looking out at us. So that is a kind of a fun thing that we like to show in this painting. And then something that I've left for you that I did yesterday was to remove the facing paper that we put on all of the areas where the paint was unstable. And I'm going to just show you what that process of removal is like. So remember, this was the little boy that we saw in the painting test. I'm really doing this live, so hopefully everything will go well. So this facing paper is put on to stabilize areas of loose paint. And you might have seen it in paintings in museums and churches in Florence, because it's often put on when there's a problem that can't be addressed right away. And so let this sit a little bit. It's going to take a little while. Okay. And so the facing paper is put on in order to just stabilize that paint. So right now I'm wetting it slightly because it's been put on with a very, very thin layer of ethyl cellulose glue. And I'm just going to get that a little bit wet. And to tell me if I'm being too slow here.
No.
Everything we do takes time. So
please don't rush. Right? The audience, we as the audience, we're waiting in bated breath, but we do know that it's a painstaking process for you.
Yeah, also I don't have my glasses on, which is not a good thing. All right, here. Okay. So we put this on when the painting was going to be turned over and placed face down on the floor. And in order to work on it and make sure that, in order to turn it and make sure that the paint was going to stay secure, we did that. So there we go. So now I'm just removing it. And then this will dry. So here's the baby, the young child. Back again. Okay. I think you've gotten the general idea. So
if we were, Liz, if we were live, I would have the public give you a round of applause. But I think you just have to imagine it.
We
right?
are live.
Yeah. I mean, if we were in the flesh, right?
Right.
It's already a big privilege for us to be together here today. Thank you so much. It really is wonderful. It's wonderful to see the baby beginning to appear and to see how many different processes you have to go through before the famous cosmetic treatment.
Right.
The different layering and consolidation process is so fascinating. I wanted to share with the public the art of healing. This project is actually called the Art of Healing. And you mentioned Advancing Women Artists. For those who don't know, Advancing Women Artists is an organization that researches, restores, and exhibits art by women in Tuscany's museums and storehouses. And but I also have to say this is a collaborative project, and we're working with the painting's owners, which are the Foundation of Santa Maria Nuova and USL Toscana Centro. We also have other sponsors, and I invite you all to go into the program description and have a look at those who are supporting the Art of Healing. And I wanted to ask, you were talking about this teamwork, about this group of people with whom you work, and I'm wondering how much freedom you have with the painting. How much liberty can you take as you're going through the restoration process?
Well, as much liberty as our knees give us. No. As I said before, it's a team effort. So also everything that we do, every decision that we make is based on what's best for the painting and what it's sort of the medical do no harm. So that when I talked before about minimum intervention in the case of paintings that have never been lined, where we did a dry lining, which is just placing a canvas on the stretcher and then the painting over that canvas. But we didn't add another adhesive that we might have to then remove later. So they'll go back into those niches and they'll be stable on the wall. And a decision like that, all those decisions are pondered and by us and by the art historians or curators who oversee our work and with our sponsors. So I don't know if it's freedom exactly, but it's definitely a flowing process. And each work, which is one thing that I love about this job, is that every painting, every piece of art that I work on is different, has different problems. And so you need to find new solutions. And so that's the challenge. And I don't know if that challenge brings freedom, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of, I mean, we were talking about the muscle before, the physical aspect, but there's a lot of mind work too. It's both mind and muscle.
It's both mind and muscle.
And a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
You were talking about the man gazing out from the painting before, and we've had conversations in the past of him possibly being the sponsor. And so it's
being the spedalingo, the head of the hospital.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also, this is a process in which you are living with these paintings. I mean, I will have lived with these paintings for 2 years, probably a lot longer than Violante Ferroni lived with the paintings. And so you grow to just, you learn about them and you make all kinds of connections in your head. And that's part of the beauty of it.
Liz, you had used the medical metaphor before about these being art patients and do no harm.
Right.
But I think on the point that you're discussing right now, the idea of the art detective and the fact that you are constantly discovering new things, you're having new thoughts about the painting, you're getting to know the paintings better. And so I'm really curious to know if you and Marina Vincenti, your colleague, what sorts of discoveries you have made. Anything new that's come up?
Well, yes, actually. Now, we've made several discoveries, and we might talk about those a little bit later when we talk about her technique, but Violante, definitely reworked some areas. So, for instance, in this painting, you can see an area where the mother's arm is coming down and there's the child's hand, and then behind her what may be bedclothes, or there are other brush strokes under that. And so we feel that there may be a reworking here of the sleeve or possibly of the bedclothes. So she definitely was not copying another composition. I mean, this was a freehand composition that she reworked. And we also found another one of those areas over here, which I'll get up and show you. This hand of the woman here was originally different. Oil paint becomes more transparent over time, so things that Violante covered up are now visible. And in Italian, they're called pentimenti. And we do find them on paintings, but it's always rather exciting when we find them. So these paintings were both black with very dark brown with dirt, and we really couldn't read them. And even with the diagnostic photography that we did with different light, visible light, UV light, infrared light, didn't necessarily pick up all of the things that we found while we were doing the cleaning. And one of them was this pentimento, where you can see that the thumb was actually up here and the sleeve was a little bit different as well. And this finger, which is now pointing out at us, was actually pointing this way. And you can see the shadow of that in the painting now because it's become more transparent. So that's always exciting. But the really exciting thing that was found by my colleague, Marina Vincenti, while we were cleaning the painting, I was over here and she was over here. And down behind this brother who is holding the bread rolls that he's going to give to the poor over here, there are these rocks. And I don't know if can the camera see this? Cleaning down here, we found Violante's signature and the year, the date of the painting. We originally thought, because in the documents, we have read that the painting was done in 1756. So we thought that was the date of the painting. That is not the date of this painting. This painting is signed, Violante Ferroni fece l'anno 1749. So Violante Ferroni made this painting in the year 1749. And you cannot possibly see the signature because we can barely see the signature. It's a secret signature. These paintings are high up on the walls of the atrium, and there's no way that visitors would be able to see Violante's signature. So I believe that she did it for herself. She signed this work. She was proud of this work, but she knew this signature would not be visible. I do have a slide of the signature, which I can show you. But that was a very, very, very exciting moment, I have to say. And that is the signature. It's a little bit shiny there because I think the painting was still wet from being undergoing cleaning. But that is our biggest discovery, and I'm sharing it with you tonight because this is the first time it's been made public.
Yeah, and I think too, it's interesting to think about at this stage in history, were artists signing their works? Because I know the great masters in the Renaissance, it was very rare for painters to put their name to a canvas. So do you know what was happening at this
time? Well, some of them were
time?
And some of them weren't.
Okay.
I mean, her maestro, Gian Domenico Ferretti, he did sign some of his works and dated some of his works. The other works that we know of hers, which are smaller works, are signed on the reverse of the canvas. And so we've also been able to compare the signature we found with a couple of signatures that we know are from works of Violante's. But it was not at all usual. It was, sometimes they would hide them in an inscription. Or, 100 years earlier, there's the David and Goliath, and just very recently in London, they found Artemisia's signature on the sword of David. Mm-hmm. And so, yes and no. But I think it really means something. And it was not anywhere near as usual as it is now. Now everybody signs their works. No, this was something special. This was a message. Very different from Plautilla Nelli's message, which was to the world. Mm-hmm. She signed her magnificent, enormous Last Supper, Pray for the Paintress, Plautilla Nelli, and she wanted the world to know. Violante is really doing this, I think, for herself.
But did you find a signature? You didn't find a signature on the other painting.
No, we did not. And it's possible that there was a signature on this painting as well, and that it was removed during a cleaning, because this painting was much more, unfortunately, abraded during a previous restoration than this painting. So this one underwent 3 restorations. And one of them there was a very drastic cleaning, mm-hmm. whereas this one did not. So that's just one of the curious things about comparing these two works.
Yeah, no, Liz, I think it's not common to have 2 works by the same artist in the studio at the same time.
And, of this size.
Of this size, right. And so I wanted to ask if for us tonight, you could do a little bit of comparison between the 2 works, if there are differences in style, composition, and even theme.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, that's the beauty of being able to have the 2 works together. It's just a wonderful opportunity, as conservation treatment usually is, to be able to study the paintings up close, to be able to learn more about the artists. And in this case, it really is quite a mystery, because we got, as I said, this painting first, and we learned about Violante as a great colorist, and especially during the cleaning, all these vibrant colors and hues were coming out, and these almost liquid brush strokes. And this one is very, very different. So different that at first we were almost until we found the signature, we were almost thinking, well, maybe this is not by Violante Ferroni. It's really different. And but they go together in a contrasting sort of way, because you have this painting, which is Saint John of God visiting, healing victims of the plague, and it's a night scene. It takes place in a bedroom at night. There's a large curtain. The whole top of the painting is very dark. You have this green curtain, which has sort of shimmering to violet colors in it. And you see a doorway in the back with the other friar who is behind, against, sort of backlit against the sky, the evening sky or the dawn sky. And you see many, many figures crowding around this oval composition, and most of them are women. Then the central figure is a mother, and she is supporting this child who has a garland and is very pale, and in fact looks as though he has just awoken from a coma, or he's just been resuscitated by the saint. I mean, I think that is the point of this painting. And then you have this very mysterious figure in red over here to my right, who is, again, her face is backlit by the light emanating. The light source is really mostly emanating from the saint himself, although we do have some light coming down on the far left of the painting. And you have this very mysterious figure in red. But there's a lot of play of color and contrasting color in this painting, and then you know, a lot of light and dark. Whereas this painting, we have a day scene. It's almost uniformly lit. We have many figures again, but most of the figures are male. So they're night and female, day and male. There are also many other strange things about comparing the two, and one of them is that these are both supposed to be John of God, but they don't look like they're the same saint. They're very different looking. Mm-hmm. And this saint is wearing a black habit, which was the habit of the brothers of Fate Bene Fratelli, literally the do-good brothers of the hospital order of St. John of God. And these friars are wearing brown. So they're not even wearing the same habit, which is quite odd. They're in dark brown and they're in black.
And sorry, just to interrupt you, but there's an allegorical figure in
yes.
both, right? Yes. And that's the male allegorical figure.
Male allegorical figure is just an excuse for Violante to show off her prowess in doing this incredible muscular torso twisting and back too. But we have thought that this red represents an allegorical figure, so it could be. But he is holding the child over here, and this is a group of poor who are receiving the bread, and then we have this figure who's looking out at us, and we're not sure who he is, possibly the head of the hospital, but definitely that figure is connecting with us. And then over here on the right, we have the other brother, and then probably other people who are waiting to receive a handout from St. John of God. And the man on the far right is holding what we think is a crutch. So the infirm, the elderly, and the poor are all receiving charity from St. John of God. That's the message here. This painting, so that's quite clear. This painting, can I keep going?
Sure, sure.
Okay, yeah. This painting is quite mysterious because in the documents about the painting, the contemporary documents say that Giuseppe Ricca, who wrote the history of the Florence monuments, and so he was visiting all these churches and places, and he came to San Giovanni di Dio in 1756, and he says that Violante Ferroni had painted this painting, St. John of God gives bread to the poor, and that she was about to paint the other oval, and he gives a completely different title and scene to the other oval. It was something to do with the Pope And obviously this is not that scene. So she painted another scene. And so people have thought that it was healing victims of the plague because there were plague victims who did come to that hospital. And that was one of their charitable works. And in fact, St. John of God, Juan Ciudad, died of the plague. So he was very involved with healing plague victims. However, there's another story that one of the brothers today, who's also an art historian of San Giovanni di Dio, has put forth, which is that this is not St. John of God, but it's his disciple, and he's actually healing the Infante, the future Prince of Spain, Philip IV, who was, his mother was very religious, and she was very connected with San Giovanni di Dio, and also this friar who was a healer, whose name was Pietro Egesiaco. And so it could be that that is that story. Mm-hmm. But in any case, there's healing taking place.
Yeah, yeah. Which do you think? Can I ask, or do we have to wait till the end of the restoration?
I go back and forth on this one. I go back and forth on this one. Maybe we'll update you on that. But there, I mean, I'm unsure, because definitely that child, the fact that he's wearing a crown, I think it's a boy, a toddler. He's wearing a crown of beautifully painted flowers, signifies that he's passed on. Okay, and then there are these candles. It's almost as though this is his bier, and so he's being awoken, and we know that that's what happened with this little Prince of Spain. But would the Queen of Spain be barefoot with a sandal? I don't know. I'm conflicted.
It's those bare feet that get
you.
you.
It's those big bare feet that really get me.
Yeah. Liz, I mean, I think at this time, and restoring a painting about health and about healing, and I know for a long time, for many months during lockdown, you were restoring these paintings, and I wanted to ask.
Not during lockdown, we couldn't, but yeah, as soon as we could.
During the period. What did it mean to you to be working with paintings of this theme about physical and spiritual needs of people?
Well, it means so much to me. I mean, when we first started this project and we named it The Art of Healing, we were thinking of the art that has such a healing influence in the hospitals in Italy and has always had that. So that's where it came from. And I still believe that today. I really believe that today, even more than I did then. But, when I found out that these paintings were in the atrium and that they did triage on plague victims that came in because the hospitals were overflowing, this was in the fall of 2019, and that had historical interest for me. And then when our hospital started to overflow and we were working on this painting about healing, it just meant so much more. I know it sounds really corny, but it's meant everything to me to have this project, to have work, to be able to do this. It's just been fantastic. And of course, here we have the economic crisis. Now we've moved to the second painting, and we have the economic fallout from COVID. So it all seems quite topical to me now, and I think very important. And I think that we need to keep focusing on beauty and art, because I really do believe in the healing aspect of all this. So, and I'm healing it, and I'm healing myself. So,
yeah,
happy.
I think we don't consider that oftentimes, that really from humanism onward, the idea of art as an agent of healing. And the fact that so many ancient hospitals, Santa Maria Nuova being one of them, for example, where Leonardo dissected, how important it was for them to have a big art collection for the patients, for those who were living there. And that will continue today, because it will continue to be a center for health when these go back up
That's right.
in their niche. Right. And Liz, I wanted to, well, first, before I look at the questions, I wanted to see if those writing in are writing some questions for you. But I wanted to give a shout out to our art angels. There is an ever-growing group of people, we call them art angels, who are supporting this artwork. And I wanted to invite everyone who is listening in to visit our website, to look at the Art Angel program, the various events that are taking place, et cetera, so that we can see the love grow and on some level.
Thank you.
I have a, let's see. Let's see. I'm looking for some questions here. Okay, we have one from... Sorry, Liz. This is we want the Mickey B would be interested in seeing the project timeline and treatment plan. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the timeline, when it arrived in the studio, and when we're thinking that it will be shown to the public? When will it be finished?
Well, I believe that we're planning on having the inauguration of these paintings in May. Is that correct?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
And we got the first painting in October of 2019. Of course, there was a lot of planning and proposals and treatment project worked on before that, but the actual work started on this painting in the fall of 2019. And so it's been about a year, and it will be about a year and a half for both paintings. So, I mean, from our point of view, that's actually rather fast. I mean, considering periods of lockdown. So,
yes.
And because there's a lot of study and there's a lot of waiting time too. I mean, you send something out for analysis and you wait for that to come back, and you wait to have a meeting. And so in terms of the treatment plan, I went over in very broad outlines, but I basically to address the deterioration of the painting, and which in this case involved a lot of flaking paint, because this painting, as I said before, had been drastically cleaned, and then they had applied a layer of animal glue and then a pigmented varnish. And then another varnish was applied. So there was, and then there was dirt. And none of this probably involved, maybe only one of the restorations involved removing the paintings from their niches. And of course, the paintings also have beautiful gold gilded, water gilded frames, wooden frames that I didn't mention, that we are also restoring those. And they go between the stucco work, beautiful Baroque stucco work, oval niches, and the paintings themselves. So
I'm standing up because I can't visualize the questions from my phone, so I'm going to go over here and see.
Okay, I will wait for you, Linda.
Yes, sorry.
With bated breath. So I'll keep talking until you give me the next question.
Yes.
And so the cleaning phase was a very long and delicate phase, and that's a step-by-step process, and it really involves doing a lot of testing, so we can't make a definitive proposal of what we're going to use.
Okay, Liz, we have a question from artist Rhea Stravopoulos, Greek artist in London.
Hi, Rhea.
And who is actually an AWA advocate and good friend. She's wondering, you made a reference to watercolor, and you said watercolor and not oil.
No,
when you're talking about the restoration.
I was talking about our restoration, and what we usually do on top of the fill, and it depends on the painting, because sometimes we can, a painting that's a panel painting with using tempera, older paintings, we will carry through the entire process using watercolor, and we'll also do that on contemporary paintings. But in this case, we will cover the base of the fill with either tempera or watercolor. and to get fairly close to the original color in a lighter and somewhat colder tone. And then we will glaze with we never use oil paints, because oil paints darken and yellow. And so, and also they're much less reversible than the paints we use, which are pigments ground in varnish. So we make our own colors with, we can also use proprietary conservation colors, but oftentimes I use the ground pigment and I grind it in varnish. And so that's what we use.
Liz, Elise Chapin, who is Florence based, is wondering what got you interested in restoration. So your history.
My history. Well, I was actually studying art history and history. My story is fairly typical, although my father was a painter and an art historian. And so he would come and give courses in Europe in the summer and come back and tell me about the Sistine Chapel. And he got me interested in art, I think. And also I watched him painting and I painted with him. But anyway, in college, I came here in my junior year abroad. And this dates me a bit, but it was the 10th anniversary of the 66 flood. So they were unveiling Cimabue's crucifix. And I saw that and I thought, wow, this is really, really exciting. I really love history, and I've always had a kind of a strong mechanical bent and a lot of curiosity, and I love to paint, but I wanted to do something with art history that was also hands-on, and I thought this was my aha moment. And I waffled a little bit, but basically it was from when I was a junior, and I went back and finished school and worked for a year for a conservator in Washington, D.C., and then was able to come here and go to graduate school. So that's how it started.
A lot of things happen in that junior year for people. I came here my junior year and never went home.
Me almost never. Yeah,
exactly. Listen, from a compositional standpoint, there's a question from Mickey B, the compositional standpoint. And I really like this question because, as you know, looking at the painting of the plague victims and seeing this curtain and wondering why she spent so much, space and effort on the curtain. So the question is, where in the atrium did these hang? And from a compositional standpoint, the blank top third of the painting makes me wonder where a viewer would stand to view these.
Good question, because the paintings are hanging above the staircase. So as you're walking up the staircase, you have the paintings directly below you, but and you're looking across the whole atrium at the other painting. So you can see that painting frontally. Then you get to the top of the staircase and you're looking towards the top of the paintings. When you're coming into the hospital, you're looking at the figures below. So there are multiple viewpoints. This painting is very mysterious. We've asked ourselves that question too. Is it a contrast to this very elaborate cloud scheme going on in this painting? Was the painting not finished? We even asked ourselves, because there's something very, very fluid and almost very quick about her brushwork here. And also there's not a lot of paint. Now, is there not a lot of paint? It's hard to tell whether it's because the paint has been scrubbed away during previous cleanings or whether there was never much paint to begin with. Generally, she does not paint very thickly, but she paints quickly and in large brush strokes. And then she highlights certain things like the garland of flowers on the child. That's painted with great care. The faces are obviously painted with greater care, but the background of this one is very sketchy, very sketchy. And no, I think it's also to make a real contrast with the face of the saint. I think it's to surround him with this darkness. And that's how I read it. But in terms of the point of view, there is no single point of view in that space. So it's tricky. I mean, it would be tricky for an artist to figure out that composition.
Right, right. Liz, we have a question from Andrew Freeman, one of our art angels. And his question is, some researchers are working with gecko-inspired adhesives to stabilize areas like this. Any experience with those?
With what inspired adhesive?
Gecko, Gecko, gecko-inspired.
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're referring to there.
Okay. Andrew, maybe if you want to clarify your question.
Yeah, send me an email. I'd be happy to go into it further.
Yes. Okay. And we'll do one more question to end. Let me find it. Go upwards. Let's see. Okay, so we have Roseanne Milano. I'm guessing you are American. Where are you from? And how did you end up in Florence, which we discussed?
Well, I was born in Pennsylvania. My family's from Massachusetts, so I consider myself an East Coaster. And I discussed before how I ended up here, which was to go to school and, you know, stay very little time. And then when I came back, I thought, well, I'm going to go to graduate school and then I'll go back to the US. And I just stayed. So, but I often go to the US and looking forward to going back when I can.
Yes, we're waiting.
We're waiting.
Also, for those who are stateside or in other parts of the world, we know
we're
there
waiting
are
for you to come
Australians
back
as well who have tuned in the middle of the night. My heart goes out to the Australians who are losing sleep.
Very much appreciate that.
Yeah. But I really wanted to thank everybody, and thank you, Liz, for welcoming us. And really, it's a privilege to be able to be here with you, and it's a privilege to have our guests here as well. For those who are not in Italy, we hope you can come back soon, and
we're waiting for you.
Yeah, for those who are in Italy, we're hoping that
we're waiting for you, and then we're going to leave. No.
So thank you so much. Thank you to the Florentine, obviously to Advancing Women Artists, and all of our art angels for this work.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda.